The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Welcome to Philadelphia Baseball, past, present, and personal. I'm Bill Kashatus, your host on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. 15 years have passed since Taylor Hooton, a promising baseball prospect who was abusing anabolic steroids, committed suicide. In 2003, Hooton, then a 6'2" and 180 pounds, was urged by a coach to get bigger to improve his pitching performance. Since many of his high school teammates got bigger by using some form of appearance and performance-enhancing substance, Taylor followed their examples, and it proved to be fatal. Taylor Hooton's case is an extreme one, but the use of appearance and performance-enhancing drugs by teens is even more troubling than the use of APEDs by elite athletes in professional baseball, football, and track. What's worse, adolescent steroid use is growing. In 1993, 1 in 45 high school students admitted to using anabolic steroids. By 1999, the number increased to 1 in 27. Today, 1 in 16 high school students, about 1.5 million, admit to using the drugs. Those numbers do not include teens taking nutritional supplements laced with steroids or steroid precursors like creatine and andro. The Taylor Hooton Foundation, a non-profit organization underwritten by Major League Baseball, was established by the late pitcher's family to honor his memory. On Sunday, July 22nd, the Phillies will be hosting a benefit to raise funds for the organization. In addition, the foundation will conduct an outreach program at Citizens Bank Park at the end of August to educate students, parents, and coaches about the signs and dangers of steroid use. To give us a better idea of APEDs is my guest, Donald Hooton, president of the Taylor Hooton Foundation. Along with his father, Don Sr., Don founded the charity in 2004, just 1 year after the loss of his brother. Don leads the organization's educational efforts in high schools, middle schools, and universities across the United States, Canada, and Latin America. He also ensures that the foundation's information is current and relevant to today's young people and their parents, coaches, and teachers. Welcome to the podcast, Don.
Thanks for having me, Bill. It's a pleasure.
Let's begin by defining for listeners the term appearance and performance-enhancing drugs. What exactly are these drugs?
So APDs, appearance and performance-enhancing drugs, are going to be everything from your illegal controlled substance, which is anabolic steroids and human growth hormone, but also in that category, you're going to find dietary supplements. And it's not all dietary supplements on the market that are bad. I'm not saying that. But what we do know is due to loose regulation, many dietary supplements, about 1 in every 4, will test positive and be contaminated or tainted with illegal drugs, some of them being anabolic steroids, Viagra. They have found some opioids in these drugs, and everything all in between, even to meth, has been found in some of these products. So, when it comes to anabolic steroids, growth hormone, dietary supplements, and even energy drinks, anything that people are using to try and get that edge, but could also potentially be harmful to their bodies or lead to long-term health issues.
Mm-hmm. The interesting thing about this is that the benefits, particularly for a young athlete, seem to be extraordinary. I mean, teens use APEDs for the very same reasons that the pros do, that those drugs are going to build muscle mass, they're going to improve their quickness, their recovery time from injury, and, those types of benefits give a young athlete a competitive edge, in terms of their power, their speed, their endurance. And we've talked about this before. This is fascinating to me, that the fastest growing group of steroid users are female non-athletes who are intent on improving their physical appearance. Were these the reasons Taylor began using steroids?
Yeah, no, Bill, you're absolutely right. One of the reasons, our young people are using this stuff, you hit the nail right on the head, is not just to improve their athletic performance. And Taylor is no different than any other team, that's around today. The top three reasons that our young people report to turning to these substances is, one, is they want to look better. Two, they want to feel better about themselves. And third is to improve athletic performance. So what we found is the majority of young users really have no desire to compete on the athletic field, but what they have the desire to do is change their physical appearance. And, that means a lot of things for a lot of different people, whether they're trying to lose weight, whether they're trying to put on muscle, especially, for the young females today, there's just this pressure to have what society tells us is this perfect body that you would see in a commercial, or you see on the cover of a magazine, or you see all over Instagram and various other social media platforms.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I found so disturbing about these drugs is that they're so insidious. I mean, the side effects of these things can be so damaging, and especially the teens who are already going through a lot of physiological and hormonal changes. Was your family able to recognize any of these side effects and relate them to APED use? I mean, did you have Taylor tested for APEDs?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because any parent that's listening, could relate to my parents at the time. At the time, my parents really had no idea my brother was using anabolic steroids. They also, like most parents even today, have never been educated on this topic. It's a topic that parents aren't, being talked to about. It's a topic that is not being covered in our schools. So when they saw my brother, having these huge mood swings, everything from being extremely angry and upset and aggressive to, within 10 or 15 minutes, being depressed and sad and down, a lot of people would relate that, it's just a young man or a young woman going through puberty, and this is just what happens. But, Taylor had some more outbursts. One of the specific stories I always like to share is, my dad asked him to go out and cut the grass, just a simple chore that's around the house. And he got really upset. He wasn't going to go cut the grass, and he exploded, screamed at my dad, and ran upstairs and took his pitching hand actually and punched it through one of the sheetrock walls. And, as my dad would tell you the story, 10 to 15 minutes later, Taylor came down. He was crying. He was upset, apologizing for the way he had behaved, and at that point his hand was hurting pretty bad. So, my parents took him to an orthopedic surgeon. The orthopedic surgeon never asked, hey, why did this happen? Why was this behavior so explosive? But Taylor also experienced acne, very, very severe. And as I tell people, our last family vacation together, Taylor and I were out hanging out on the beach together, just talking as brothers would do. And, I could tell that his skin had turned, sort of a yellowish orange. He had this acne that had grown across his chest, across the top of his back and down the back of his arms, these big red pimples with whiteheads. If I could give you the best description possible, and he had brought this to my parents' attention, and, my parents said, okay, well, it's a teen thing. We'll take you to a dermatologist. The dermatologist gave him a prescription for acne, and on his way, they sent him back home. Never asked if it could be anything related to anabolic steroid use. And, these are all very textbook signs that, we need to be looking out for. But the main thing was, outside of the behavior and the acne that was developing on the outside, was, Taylor had begun using these drugs. My parents saw this, intense interest, if you will, to work out every day, go to the gym every day, sometimes twice a day. And Taylor had put on 30 pounds of muscle within a couple of weeks, which, it's impossible. It's physically impossible for the body to do that, especially at that young age. But my parents just thought, hey, he's trying to be healthy. He's trying to, achieve his goals of getting bigger, stronger, and faster. And, he wants to make the varsity team. But never did my parents connect the dots that, hey, we've got a steroid user in our home, and it's something that, that we should be aware of. But when my parents did, because, I had confided in my parents that, this was going on, and it's something, they need to, be looking at closer towards the end of my brother's life. And, they took him into the family physician and, told the family physician that they thought my younger brother Taylor was using anabolic steroids and he needs to test him. Well, the physician ordered a test, and they tested my brother, and it came back negative. And he said, he told my family, look, I told you I wasn't using steroids. But what the physician didn't realize is that a standard drug test with your standard drug panels, which would be like marijuana, cocaine, heroin, those sorts of things, it does not pick up the use of testosterone in the body. And it's got to be a specific test that is ordered. It's a little bit more expensive. But the doctor didn't know it. So, I mean, you had a family physician, you had an orthopedic surgeon, you didn't have a dermatologist, that nobody asked the question on these textbook steroid side effects as to what was going on with my brother's body.
So we're talking 2003 now, and there is very little research being done on steroid abuse among teenagers. What you're describing here is that, your family is, for mostly for worse, pioneering whatever research is going to happen in this field. And the way it's happening is Taylor, who I understand was your all-American kid. He was personable, intelligent. He was a popular kid in high school. He had a steady girlfriend, and he becomes this completely out of control teen, and it is above and beyond what the natural moodiness and depression of adolescence would bring on, and that is to say, nothing of the other possibly damaging side effects, like ligament tears, possibility of liver disease, cancer, all these other things, heart problems that have been linked to steroid use. So, again, this is, I think, part of the truly insidious nature of these drugs. And I'm glad you mentioned the testing, because definitely at that period of time, the only drug testing was done was for recreational drugs.
Yes.
But through my research on this topic, and from speaking to your father, there are nearly 120 different types of tests for specific steroids. If you're taking Winstrol, which is basically a lean muscle builder, for better definition, you got to have a particular test, or it's not going to show up. If you're taking Decadurobalin, then you got to have, which is a mass muscle builder, you got to have another type of test. So there's no even generic test for steroids itself. They're all separate. And they are expensive, and I understand the schools don't want to do this kind of testing because they are expensive.
Yeah, it just wouldn't be affordable. I mean, when you talk about performance-enhancing drug testing, it's so sensitive that the instruments that are used to test, whether it's blood or urine, has to be looking for these specific drug makeups, and you had listed a few of them. And one of the biggest issues, that we experienced here in Texas was, Texas implemented, steroid testing within our high schools. And Bill, to your point, it's extremely expensive, which, professional sports has millions of dollars to invest in these various tests. But when it gets to a high school level, you're talking, it can be anywhere from $150 up to $600 a student to test them. And you would talk to an administrator about this, and there's no way we could afford it. But if you look at what they did here in Texas, which is very interesting, is when they implemented the performance-enhancing drug program, what they did was, it's public knowledge, but they were testing for 10 of the most widely used anabolics at that time. So 10, right? So they're testing for these 10 specific steroids. There's over 120 types of pharmaceutical grade steroids that are being produced. So right off the bat, your young person has a 90% plus chance of passing this test. Now, what our young people are getting, Bill, they're getting these drugs that are being, the raw materials are being manufactured in China, and they're coming over here in the United States, and, they come over in a powder form, and they're mixed with various oils, everything from peanut oil, Wesson oil, sesame seed oil, even motor oil, Armor oil, and horse urine. And the way that these drugs are marketed is that they're designed, and everybody's heard of designer steroids before, they're designed to beat, any of today's drug testing regimens. And you see this going on in professional sports. A lot of people say, well, how is that possible? So you go back to this test where they're analyzing these specific drugs. Well, you start messing with a molecule or two, they still have all of the same characteristics as that anabolic steroid, but now they're designer steroid that are designed to beat these tests, and the testing regimens aren't picking it up. So it's almost like the chemist is one step ahead of the folks that are doing the testing. So it's an ongoing game, but that's the type of drugs that our kids are using. And, especially when it gets into our high schools, we just can't afford the testing in order to, figure out if anybody's using. And that's really not the biggest issue. The biggest issue is just still our lack of education in the schools. You talk to most of our high school students around the country, nobody's talking with them about the dangers of these drugs and why they shouldn't be using them even if they were legal.
Mm-hmm. Before we go on to that issue that I do want to address, I wanted to circle back to Taylor for one minute. It's my understanding that he began his use in January of 2003, and he took his life on July the 15th of that same year. Mm-hmm. That's 6 months. That's 6 months. Now, part of this was accelerated by the fact that in actually taking the steroids, there is a cycling process. It's 6 to 12 weeks. But what a lot of these kids do in order to build the mass much quicker is they stack. That means they take different types of steroids. And they don't take off an equal amount of time. That is to say, if you cycle for 6 weeks, you got to take off an equal amount of time. But instead of doing that, they bump it up against each other. So they're not taking any break. That combined with the fact that I know that Taylor was taking antidepressants for this, just accelerated his depression because he wasn't clean of the steroids, and that led him to taking his life. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, and so there's one other big piece that we're missing here. It's the sole fact that we're altering the hormones in our body. And, sadly, after losing my brother and as we continue to grow the Taylor Hooton Foundation and people become more aware, I've talked to parents. I've talked to young people that have used these drugs and parents that have lost young people to these drugs or that are struggling with it. And what happens, Bill, is we begin to alter the hormones in the body. So you take a 16-year-old young Taylor, whose body is doing everything it can to get from adolescence into adulthood, going through puberty essentially, right? So, the hormones in the body are already imbalanced. And anybody listening, to this discussion can relate when they're growing up in those teen years and, having those giant mood swings. But once the human body accepts this artificial testosterone or anabolic steroids, if you will, the brain says we've got way too much of this stuff in the body. So there's no longer a need for the body to produce natural testosterone. So you're actually supplementing this testosterone with the artificial anabolic steroids, right? And you're supplementing it. And what happened with Taylor was, he began to see a psychiatrist about some of these mood swings, and ultimately told the psychiatrist that, and he told me this along the way, that the anabolic steroids were making him feel very different. When I asked Taylor about what does he mean when they make him feel different, is, he told me they make him feel aggressively depressed. And the psychiatrist, not knowing how to deal with this, and we can go back to the doctor discussion here in a minute if you'd like, Bill, but, told Taylor that he needed to quit these drugs cold turkey. And if you've had the opportunity to talk to anybody that's been around these drugs or have experience with these drugs long enough, is that, that was basically a prescription for his death, because the body is no longer producing natural testosterone. You've got a 17-year-old young man walking around with no natural testosterone production. He's no longer supplementing that testosterone, which ultimately, as we all know, you start getting that big hormonal imbalance. That's where things, like depression, become a big issue, and ultimately caused Taylor to, be depressed enough that he took his own life.
Mm-hmm. Now, the research that has been going on since Taylor's death, a lot of this has been done by Harrison Pope of Mass General and Harvard University, and he was the first one that said, yes, steroids can be addictive and they can lead to suicide. And, of course, the bodybuilding world denied all of this. And from my conversations with people who have used anabolic steroids, they are addictive, if no other way, psychologically addictive, because of the rush it gives you in terms of your body appearance and the improvement of the appearance. It's just like an athlete who has to run every single day or has to lift weights. I mean, if you're not doing those things, then your mood alters. So even if they aren't physiologically addictive, which I think they are, they're psychologically addictive. And I think, that is what we're missing here. And it's, from what I understand, when you and your father began the Taylor Hooton Foundation, or actually before the foundation was started, you and your father were going out and offering to do these talks at schools, and you were rejected. You were soundly rejected. And who was rejecting you? Many of the coaches who were the same ones who were telling their student athletes that they need to get bigger, which, as we all know, is code for juicing.
Yeah, and the biggest problem, Bill, is today when we tell a young person, especially on the other side, you got to lose weight, right? You got a lot of people that struggle, like myself, with their weight. They're told, hey, you need to get bigger, you need to lose weight, you need to get stronger. All of these different things. We're in a day of age where young people want to have the quickest route to get there, and they're turning to dangerous substances. But the biggest problem is when an adult addresses a young person and tells them you need to lose weight, you need to get bigger, stronger, faster. Most adults aren't prepared, to show a young person how to do that. And it starts with food. It starts with a proper diet. It starts with a workout regimen. So what I encourage anybody that's going to tell a young person, that they need to get bigger, stronger, faster, or lose weight or look better, in the clothes that they're wearing, to be prepared to, meet with that person on a regular basis, talk about and get an understanding why they want to change that physical appearance. But the other thing is what does your diet currently look like? What are we going to do to change this diet and change your habits to help you get to that physical goal? And, especially if they want to use some of these products to help if they think that that's going to help them get bigger, stronger, faster, find out what it is they're taking, why do they want to take it, so that as adults we can be there to help these young people achieve their physical goals without the use of drugs and give them the proper guidance they need.
Mm-hmm. In March of 2005, Congress finally took Major League Baseball to task for their steroid problem. Your father gave opening testimony in those congressional hearings on steroids in Major League Baseball, and he went head on with Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, all these guys who had been juicing, and said, look, you guys might not know it and you might not like it, but you are heroes, and in many respects, your behavior and what you say has much greater influence on our children than the parents do. And I know that he was very disappointed in especially McGuire's failure to acknowledge any of this stuff. Mm-hmm. But it is also my understanding that Bud Selig, then the commissioner of baseball, after those hearings, made a commitment for Major League Baseball to support the Taylor Hooton Foundation. Mm-hmm. Tell us how that came about, and what exactly is the relationship now between Major League Baseball and the Taylor Hooton Foundation?
We are so very thankful for the support that we receive from Major League Baseball. In fact, Bill, if it weren't for Major League Baseball, my guess is the nearly 2 million kids that we've directly impacted, here in the United States, Canada, Latin America, would have never heard this message, and we probably wouldn't be having this phone call today. But after, Commissioner Emeritus Bud Selig, sat through that testimony, he picked up the phone. It was about a week later and called, my parents' house and, told them who it was and that, this is Commissioner Bud Selig and, we want to know how Major League Baseball can help the Taylor Hooton Foundation. And since 2005, Major League Baseball has been the Taylor Hooton Foundation's primary sponsor. It's allowed us to go into middle schools, high schools, colleges, doctor associations, athletic trainer associations, teachers, nurses, various gatherings here across the United States, Canada, and Latin America. It's allowed us to develop online content that has reached people worldwide. We do programs every year in all 30 Major League Baseball parks. So, on August 28th, for example, we'll be at Citizens Bank Park, and we've partnered with the professional baseball athletic trainers who deliver this play campaign in all 30 parks, and play stands for promoting a lifetime of activity for youth. So we'll open the program where we talk to these young people about the dangers of appearance and performance enhancing substances, and they get to go down with the same staff that takes care of the Philadelphia Phillies, everything from the athletic trainers to their strength coach to their team physician, to learn how to do things the right way, how they get the players warmed up, how do they keep them healthy, and how do they keep them strong on the field for 162 games regular season.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, we know the extraordinary efforts of the Taylor Hooton Foundation in educating parents, teens, coaches, teachers about the symptoms and dangers of anabolic steroid use. But I find it very sad that since 2005, Congress is nowhere to be seen. I know that there were joint efforts between the Justice Department, the FDA, and the FBI in 1992, 2005, and 2007 to conduct sting operations against APED distributors from Mexico and China. Those operations were successful. They resulted in the convictions of more than 200 distributors and the seizure of millions of dollars of steroids. It also slowed the flow of raw steroids into the United States. But what else can the federal government and especially Congress do to address this issue?
Mm-hmm. Education. I think they need to make it just, mandatory for young people to be educated on this topic, just like we do when it comes to alcohol and recreational drug abuse. To this day, you can go into most schools' health curriculum, physical education curriculum. You're not going to see anything about anabolic steroids, growth hormone, dietary supplements. It's just not there. And, that's why, our programs are so important. And it's something, we continue to talk to the federal government about. It's okay. You wanted to call Major League Baseball in, and what has Major League Baseball done? They've made an investment with us. So, we've directly impacted nearly 2 million people. Major League Baseball now has the strictest performance-enhancing drug program out of all of professional sports. Yet, the government has sat back and has done nothing when it comes to impacting the lives of the most important people that we deal with. And that's the future of this country, and it's our young people.
I was shocked to see when I was doing my research that anabolic steroids are a Schedule III classification, which are, drugs that may or may not be addictive. Classification 1 and 2 drugs are, your recreational drugs. And steroids, which in many senses is much more powerful than marijuana, which is a higher classification, is Schedule III. So what that means is the sentencing guidelines for a distributor are really non-existent. You have got to be distributing or in possession of an awful lot of steroids in order to get 3 months jail time. And the authorities don't even bother prosecuting. I was shocked to see that. Absolutely shocked. So one of the things that I would encourage Congress is to change the sentencing guidelines on it and elevate the classification of steroids. If for nobody else, the teenagers. Because it's a much more severe drug than is being recognized right now. Don, thank you for all this time. I just have 2 more questions I really want to address with you. I think it's been a very, very informative discussion here. 4 years ago, the Taylor Hooton Foundation established an advisory board of active players from across Major League Baseball. I should say that there had been an advisory board, but it was expanded. And that board is called the All Me League. It began with 13 members and has expanded to 36 now, including 2 from the Philadelphia Phillies, Aaron Nola and Jake Arrieta. All these players are wonderful role models for youngsters, and they're not afraid to be identified as such either. Tell us about the All Me League and its members. How exactly did that start, and tell us about some of the people that are part of this.
Certainly, we believe, and it'll always be a belief that education is extremely important. But we got to thinking along the way, what can we do to inspire young people, to get them to want to live and compete performance-enhancing drug-free? How do we do that? And, it was interesting because, it was one of our board members and we were just sitting there visiting about work, and he said, well, what about the name All Me? And I said, well, I think that's great. In fact, it was interesting as we were talking to Clayton Kershaw about this whole movement. He's like, that sounds really cocky, but I like it. But basically, when you see All Me, this is, all of my hard work. I'm completely drug-free. I got this way on my own. And, so we had reached out at the time. We said, okay, we've got this concept, this great concept to inspire people. And what we really need behind this message is we need some celebrity power. And we want guys that have done it the right way, guys that will voluntarily step forward to become role models for young people. And, so we originally reached out to Major League Baseball and asked for permission if we could contact all 30 Major League Baseball teams and ask through the athletic training staff and the strength coach staff that, they find one player that will voluntarily step forward to become a role model for young people. And, we thought we would be very successful when, we would get to 5, and then ultimately we got to 13. And, as we talk on the phone today, Bill, we've got 39 Major League Baseball players representing all 30 Major League Baseball teams. And these guys are excited about this. It's something that they're passionate about because they can make an impression on these young people. But what's great is we've also expanded outside of baseball, and we've got 2 female athletes. One is Mandy Marquette, who is a professional cyclist, and then we've got Elise Willoughby, who is a Olympic BMX champion. So we have 2 females that are out there also that are role models for these young girls, to show them that they too can make it to the pinnacle of their sport or their business without the use of performance-enhancing drugs.
Mm-hmm. Last question for you. On Sunday, July the 22nd, the Phillies are playing the San Diego Padres. That is the Taylor Hooton Foundation benefit that the Phillies are going to put on. Tell us a little bit about this. You also, I think, are still looking for sponsors. How can one sponsor this event? And some of the other details.
Absolutely. So we will be hosting what we call a Give a Hoot benefit with the Philadelphia Phillies, and we're so thankful for their donation. And what it is we will be launching here later this week a Charity Buzz auction item where you and 7 of your friends can attend the Phillies game in a luxury box. That includes all of your food and drinks, and 2 of the winners of that 8-person package will get to go down on the field for a pregame ceremony with one of our MLB advisory board members from the Philadelphia Phillies, and we will be announcing that later this week. But we are looking for sponsors. We have some ticket packages available, both ticket packages and individual tickets, where all of the proceeds are going to benefit the Taylor Hooton Foundation. And we're also hoping that we've got a former Philadelphia Philly that will be stopping by to say hello to our guests and thank them for their support in this great cause.
Excellent. For those interested in more information about the Taylor Hooton Foundation, its educational programs as well, you can access their website at taylorhooton.org/. If you're interested in learning more about Taylor, you can purchase my book, Suicide Squeeze, Taylor Hooton, Rob Garibaldi, and the Fight Against Teen Steroid Abuse, either on Amazon.com or from the publisher, Temple University Press. Don, thanks for being with us, and thanks for all you do, you and your family and the staff of the Taylor Hooton Foundation, who I've gotten to know pretty well over the last several years, and I really appreciate the job all of you are doing to educate teens, parents, teachers, and coaches on APEDs.
Well, thank you, Bill. We appreciate all your support. It's because of people like you that allow us to do the great work that we need to do every day.
And thank you, Philly fans, for tuning in. See you next week for another podcast of Philadelphia baseball, past, present, and personal. This is Bill Kashatus, rounding third and heading home on the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network.